So now it brings us to the tweet that you also sent me. I love Twitter because there's just so many debates going on there, and the threads, it's very entertaining, right? So there's a designer that, of course, with great intention, offered his advice for students who are creating their portfolio. So I'm just also going to quickly go through his advice. And then we have someone else who is in a senior position in another company, and they provided their opinion, and kind of it's a rebuttal. It's a
Yeah.
pushback, it's a hard pushback. And we're going to discuss that. Okay, so from the first designer who, with very great intention, offered his advice to the students, first of all, he said, tighten up your visual design. So he literally led with visual design, which I'm a visual person. I don't disagree with that. I think it's important, right? So he said, I know you're an impact focused product designer, but hiring managers need to know that you can deliver work that look at least as good as the current product, right? Nothing wrong
Right.
with that. Nothing wrong with what he said. Okay, so the second thing he said is do fewer case studies, maybe just 1 to 2, but make them really good. Again, I don't disagree with that. I think, of course, you got to make each one of them really good. No hiring manager ever reads more than one case study. Well, that I don't know if it's true, but it may be true. If you have more stuff, make them smaller and frame them as other projects. Maybe just one PNG for each one with no details. Ooh, that one attracted a little bit of discussion in the other tweet reply that we're going to talk about. Okay, so fourth, maybe third, this one it says, don't use a contact form. Just tell people your email. Forms are for customer support that never gets back to you. I thought that was funny. It's true. It's true. Sometimes I don't think the reason that he said was the actual reason though, because from my experience, it's because a lot of form plugins sometimes fail and you may miss out on very important emails. So it's better to include your email. If you want to, avoid spam, you may just spell out your email instead of having the whole thing, available there. And the next one, he said, in your case study, move all the sexy shots of the final product to the top. All right. So he is referring to the one of the hiring managers referred to in the case study factory article that says, I literally just skipped to the bottom because I have no time. So I want to see if you're worth my attention first. So he said, okay, why don't we make it easier for these hiring managers, right? Let me show you the dazzling final product so you spend time reading my case study. Okay, this one is an interesting one. We'll discuss that later. So another one, he said, you have to earn people's trust with your good work before they're willing to spend time reading your process. So I guess that's what he was talking about, right? Like earning their trust, basically using one dazzling screenshot to see if they're willing to move forward. So he said, spend less time on the design process. Instead, highlight some of the major challenges and what your process was tackling them. And I think that may be true, because not everybody's going to be so involved with your entire process. It's the same thing as, okay, I'm going to be telling you my day. Am I really going to be telling you every detail of my day? Probably not. Probably just the highlights, right? Otherwise, you're going to think I'm a
Right.
huge bore. Okay, so this is pretty much what he said. All right, so we're not going to go to the rebuttal tweet yet. We are just going to leave it out here for some discussions, and then we're going to go to the rebuttal. So, first of all, what do you think? Does he have good points?
So, in my opinion, I don't think that his tweets are like dogmatic in his slightest bits. I think that these are
Yeah.
just very good like foundations for making a portfolio or even
Mhm.
making a website. Period. In my
Yeah.
opinion, I know. So, in my opinion, this is just my opinion, and this is just from my experience. It seems like more and more companies are starting to come up with the product design title, right? And with the
Hmm.
product design title, it seems that as a product designer, you do have to have some fundamentals of good craft. Of course, there's other different parts of it, right? Like systems thinking, working on a product team, product thinking, and all these other different stuff. But from what I've seen from his from this tweet, because I've seen way worse, by the way, of what people need to have in their
Yeah.
portfolio.
Yeah.
I don't think this is bad. I think that this isn't even dogmatic in my opinion. I think this is just once again the foundations of like even all the way at the end, right? Like setting your portfolio to max width. It is true. A lot of people have big screens,
Yeah.
and I think that once again, when it he's probably doing this from a product design lens, and even when he says that you have to earn people's trust, what I've learned as well is that it's not only like product design managers that's looking at it, it's PMs, it's folks in marketing, it's other people that's looking at your work, right? It's recruiters from all these different agencies as well that's looking at your work first and seeing
Mhm.
if it's visually impressive. And from hiring managers that I talk to, just like this manager that we're about to talk to next, right? I mean, he works at a company, and just correct me wrong, but for that organization, visuals are like table stakes, right? Once again, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't find any of this bad at all. I mean, I think the one about the do fewer case studies part is a little bit questionable, and then number five, right, which is supposed to be number four, the sexy shots and stuff. Once again, um, that could be optional. You know what I mean, depending on who you are. But I think this is just really good fundamentals, in my opinion, and I think it's not being dogmatic on how someone should set the format or tell the story of their case study. It's just saying, hey, you need to focus on the basics before you're ready for prime time, before you're ready to, carry on to that portfolio review. Because, hey, for everyone on this call, and maybe we can even talk about that on another call, Stella, on another topic podcast, but the portfolio review is like super anal and super strict because there's certain things that you have to get right about that. And fundamentals, even when you're presenting your work, has to be shown right throughout.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yes, I totally agree. I mean, I think it's like from my perspective, everything he said is true, and I agree with you. Whether or not you do 1 to 2 case studies, you have to make it really good. That is, it's a given. But the fact that he said that just save the other one as PNGs with no details, I probably can't agree to that myself, because you might as well not present them, right? Like if you're not going to give any
Right.
context. But I think in general, he has really good points. The rebuttal tweet, however, it started a little bit strong because it says, I hate, to see tweets like that. I just strongly dislike tweets like that. I think his main point, the rebuttal tweet's main point is he wants to see more rationales behind the design. He wants to basically see more of the business thinking of the
Yeah.
designer. And I think that's definitely a very, important and valid point. And honestly, that's what separates someone from, being a product designer or UX designer from someone who purely focuses on visuals, is the fact that they have these product understanding, and the fact that their existence can actually really help a business drive its whole, its entire direction. Because now, as a founder myself, right, one of my biggest dreams, I haven't realized that yet, is to work with individuals as employees who can advise, me on my direction, because no CEO in the world is perfect, right? No one is perfect. So everything is a teamwork. So if you are able to hire employees who are, just as strategically, inclined as you are, then you have a great team. So I think he's emphasizing a little bit more on that side, and that's why he found maybe a few faults on the original chain of tweets. What do you think?
I think he's probably just fed up with advice in general, and unfortunately, that person was very unlucky to get, to come across his timeline, and he just went off, and it just happens for like a lot of stuff in life in general. But I do agree with Timothy's, you know, his thing that there is no one size fits all formula to a portfolio.
Yeah.
It really is a packaged expression of your work, your experience, your talent, and your impact. And I remember like sometimes I had a friend, he was in a coding, well, he was a self-taught coder, and he asked me, what should I have in my portfolio? And I asked him, well, what do you mean by that? He was like, what should I put in there? What do you think people want to see? And I said, first and foremost, and I think I told you this, Stella, on the first, call
Yeah.
that we've had,
Uh-huh.
on the
Yeah.
Path Unbound channel, is that a portfolio is about your craft and not your
Mm.
project. It's about you as a person. It's not
Yeah.
about the project itself, right? It's
I
about how
agree.
you solve these problems in a sense, and how you was the person that really show your talent, right? Your skills, your impact, your design superpower in a sense. And it's not just in. I just want to let people on this call know, because I know a lot of people like to just call juniors out, but no
Yeah.
matter what level you're on, like most portfolios in the industry suck. Period. Like they are really bad. And actually, Stella had a recent call with a visual designer, and we were talking about that because people
Mhm.
keep reaching out to her, companies keep reaching out to her, thinking that she's a product designer, and her name is
Right.
T Tran. And and I was just telling her the reason for that is because a lot of product designers have lackluster portfolios, and of course, the ones that work at companies like Lyft and Airbnb, they can afford to have lackluster portfolios because their signal, right, is working at a great company. We're going to talk about that branding and signal in another call. But their signal is working at a great company. But other product designers, even if they're senior and they never worked at a well-known company, there's still some grinding that they have to do, like making a great portfolio and putting that time and energy, right, to get, hiring managers, attention in a sense. So I think with Timothy, once again, as this person recently, I mean, the person that posted the previous tweet, he just probably got caught on the wrong day when Timothy was probably in the mood. But I think with Timothy, I mean, everything that he said as well, makes a really good point. And I think as far as like a hiring manager, and I just want to let people know that's listening to this, please like connect with me. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn, but please don't send me your portfolio.
Yes.
Just
Oh,
don't. I would highly recommend reaching out to a company or a person that you want to work for and getting them that hires. Like so not just a hiring manager, but it needs to be someone that's a part of the hiring process, like end to
absolutely.
end, that knows it in and out. And or that's, kind of skims, right, portfolios as well. Like show it to them, get their feedback, but don't come to me. I'm a junior. I'm not a hiring manager. They think differently than me as well. I can give you some tips and all that kind of stuff, but it's going to stop right there. So show a hiring manager, really think critically how you can tell a unique story. Really think critically how you can have your own branding, your own value proposition. And once you put a lot of work into it, it's not going to come overnight. But once you put a lot of work into it, it will pay dividends. Trust me on that.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate you clarifying that process, by the way, because it's really intimidating for newcomers to kind of put themselves out there. That's first of all, right? And then they didn't know the best approach to approach people. They would just like, oh, hey, can you look at it and then let me know. The response rate is very low. First of all, because nobody has time to do this kind of work if you're not being very, very specific. So, for example, I will absolutely respond to someone that says, oh, can you give me one specific advice in this particular area? I'm like, yeah, it takes me 5 seconds. I can tell it in 5 seconds. But if you tell me, ooh, can you critique my entire portfolio? I'm sorry, I can't, right? Nobody can unless you pay them 150 to $200 an hour. Maybe they can, right? So no, I really appreciate that. And also, I think I really appreciate you kind of like balancing the two tweets because I feel like they both have valid points. Um,
Yeah.
and the fact that maybe, Timothy was just like really being passionate one day. And then, and then the other tweet kind of got under the storm. But I do think that one point that he brought up, I want to discuss, like I mentioned to you earlier, is he mentioned that the tips that the previous person mentioned work for him because he is more
Yeah.
of a visually inclined designer. So I want to kind of extrapolate this point is that we have to really understand our own brand before we even try to do anything out there. If we know we're good at certain things, and we can be good at everything, by the way. If you think you're good at everything, look inwards because nobody's good at every single thing. So pick one or two that you're really good at and study those designers that are in your niche, basically finding your own niche instead of kind of just reaching out to everybody, trying to be like everybody. So there's nothing wrong that somebody expresses what works for them. And you can take it with a grain of salt and then move on to focus on what will work for you. So I think that one is really important as well. So now, I think, let's get back to the point that a lot of the students obviously come from boot camps, right? It's a brilliant alternative education that's way more affordable than college, reduces, you know, financial burden on, families, right? Like as much as possible. Obviously it's not free, but as a design educator, I had the privilege to look at a lot of schools curriculum and compare and contrast, the quality of them. I would preface this by saying that most schools, they know what they're doing. They're not being, they're not taking money from students and offer them nothing. They do offer a lot of values to these students, and the curriculums is not wrong in any way. They are similar, but I think, what's more important is, instead of focusing on in the first part, which is really, teaching you the basic knowledge, the last part, the second part, which is the portfolio building part, I think that's where things start to go a little bit cookie cutter. For example, I was just reviewing several schools final capstone, instructions, right? Obviously, we're not
Right.
going to name any schools. We're not going to screenshot anything, but it seems to me they literally spelled out those framework for you to follow. And students are really prone to the, I would say, the prey of groupthink, because if you spell that out for them so clearly, why wouldn't they use it? They are afraid to not use it. So I think that's one of the reasons why we see so many portfolios that starts with a nondescript headline that nobody ever wants to read, because the schools provided the template maybe from good intent, with good intention, but they didn't make it clear. Let me give you another example. So I was mentoring a few students from another education program, and they were supposed to come up with color palettes. Right, they're really early on in their study. They're just studying about color theories, and finally, they're doing a project. Come up with a color palette for your project. Great, very straightforward. And after a few students submit their homework, I was confused. You know why? Because every student, they provided three primary colors, three secondary colors, and three tertiary colors in the color palette. And I thought to myself, why? Because not every project needs exactly the same amount of colors. And then I start to ask them, and they said, "Oh, I was looking at another student's work, and that's exactly what they did, and it seems to have worked fine for them. So that's what I'm gonna do." And I thought to myself, oh, so because students are so new, they want to stay safe. Most people want to stay safe. If they have seen examples of their peers, that's what worked for them, they're going to copy it exactly. So I thought, okay, this is not the fault of the curriculum per se, but it is the fault of, I would say, educators in schools not actually emphasizing that, hey, this is just an example. Do not copy and paste. What do you think of that?
Well, unfortunately, it's like similar to education, period, public schooling education. How everyone tells you that you need to go to college to get a degree, right?
Yeah.
Everyone tells you that you need to, score. Because if you think about it with class, like, why is it that you're going off of what someone is writing down or what someone is checking off of a box to make sure that they're right, when it's not necessarily critical thinking, right? It's not
Hmm.
necessarily someone challenging the professor on an idea, then it's when they're getting a good grade for it. I think there are some classes like that, by the way, but still, majority of them are,
Yeah.
or they follow like this like kind of fundamental thing. And I remember someone said this about public schooling, that in public schooling they fail you. When you make a mistake, you fail, right? Like they give you an
Right.
F or something, and
Mhm.
then people wonder why folks are not equipped for reality in real
Yeah.
life,
Yeah.
and it's just so true. So even like with the boot camps, it should be this thing where it shouldn't be because the main focus is on like the output and inputs, right? And it should
Mhm.
be focused on okay, in the real world, you'll probably work in these kind of organizations that don't have a research budget at all.
Yeah.
Their customer base might be elusive from B2B, right? There
Hmm.
might not be any data to pull from. There might be a project where you have to skip over the design process because a
Exactly.
PM is telling you that you have to meet a certain deadline. A
Yeah.
developer, some of your designs might be like really crucial because a developer needs to make a trade-off with you, and it might affect the entire user experience, and that's okay. Like, we need to have these kind of conversations, right? And that every project that you encounter at your job is not going to be a one size fits all. There might be some stuff that you might not be, passionate about. There might be a project that you were really happy about, but you still had to make a sacrifice somewhere. There might be a project where you do need to suck up. And I'm just letting you all know the reality.
Oh
You
yeah.
do need to suck up to executives in order to get that promotion and get ahead in your career, and be detrimental, where it's detrimental to the UX process, right, of your client base. There might be a project where you're building something from scratch and you're trying to find market fit. Like, these kind of discussions need to happen, that this is how you work with PMs, this is how you work with engineers, this is how you work with folks, period. And then what if you get like a task, right, on your job that says, oh, people need to sign up, and that's it, you have no other context. How do you
Hmm.
work through that problem, especially if you're not working with a UX researcher or a content creator, or you don't have a manager? How do you build something where it's not costly, right, for the company, and it's not costing them a lot of money? So these kind of conversations, Stella, it doesn't happen, unfortunately. And it's the same thing with college. It's the same thing with public school. It's the same thing with education, period.
Yeah.
It's focusing on output and inputs, and it's not focused on like critical thinking, on working with people. One program, though, that I'm going to give a shout out, that I actually went to when I dropped out of
Mhm.
school, is called Year Up. And it's a nonprofit. So if anyone is listening, please sponsor them. Please mentor people there as well. But it's a nonprofit for young adults. And they did teach us like the nuances of corporate, of, how do you write emails? How do you deal with people that's hard to work with? How do you present your work to folks as well, right? How do you communicate with managers about certain things if you want to get ahead in your career? Like, they taught us all this stuff. And even when I look back, because I think I took it like in 2015, I went through that course, I'm still mind blown on the kind of stuff that they taught us, because I have yet to find another program that covers the basis like they do, with a bunch of different things. So they're not only teaching you like, the skills that are relevant within the industry, but they're also teaching you just like a lot of soft skills and, ethical things, right, to talk about in certain decisions that you're going to make. And I think, once again, design courses would benefit even if they just had that portion in there. So
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so glad you mentioned that, because you basically answered the next talking point that we're going to discuss. It's what kind of characteristics does real design projects in the real world have? And you mentioned all of these variables and the soft skills that unfortunately most schools are not talking about, not touching upon. And I do think that there are values in these boot camps, including ours. It's to pair you up with someone who actually works in the industry. But obviously, it is limited to that one person or several person that you talk to. So that's why I think the most valuable thing that you can do is to actually partner up with, like a startup, which we connect students with in our portfolio school program, and really get yourself in that position, no matter how small it is in the beginning, so that you can learn those soft skills. And the organization that you mentioned is super impressive, because most of the time it is hard to teach those type of soft skills. But having worked in a corporate environment myself for over a decade, I definitely think that it is to some extent possible, because there are so many scenarios, and you can kind of categorize scenarios into sort of like archetypes. It's all
yeah.
almost like a persona kind of situation. And then if we kind of play those scenarios out with students, they will open their eyes, and they will get the opportunity to practice a little bit, right? It's still going to be intimidating no matter what. But I think this is a really good thing that designers, students, they need to start thinking about early on. So now, to wrap it up, I want to discuss the types of projects that bootcamp students or students who are generally trying to get a foot in the door should look or can look to do instead of the ones that are one size fits all and cookie cutter that's quote unquote pushed by the boot camps? What kind of projects should they be looking to produce, in your opinion?
So I think the answer isn't as black and white, unfortunately, because I could just say anything. But so I think first and foremost, it you have to really get some really great product thinking skills. So asking what makes a product useful. Once again, asking yourself what kind of industries I want to work for, right? With the kind of work that you want to display. I think even if it's like schoolwork, it can be pulled off, but like the craft has to be there. The storytelling really has to be there. And I think that, in my opinion, the work that you need to display is you working with an actual product team. So not a nonprofit, not not freelancing for some one-off business, but working with an actual product team in house with product managers, engineers, and all these other different folks, right? Because then you can really tell your story on these were the constraints, unfortunately. These were the trade offs that I had to make. But this was our big win. This was our outcome, right? So, really just illustrating that. And I think having, at the end of the day, I think it's really just having a great story to tell where you can gain people's trust with, man, this person has self-awareness. This person is telling a really engaging story that I want to learn more about as well. Oh man, this person is really working on a problem space that's kind of similar to mine's, right? As well. Even once again, even if it's fake, but I would say that anyone that's listening to this call would be better off just trying to get at least one real world project under their belt, and then even if you show like the second one, it's still very strong. It's still telling a really strong story, right? And it's still talking about some really strong insights. And I would also say that and Stella, I think we're going to need to talk about this on another podcast, like the actual portfolio review.
Hmm.
But there's like different nuance roles in product design right now, like design systems and infrastructure, growth,
Hmm.
right, health,
Yeah.
all design ops, all these other different areas, UX architecture,
Hmm.
and you're going to need to make case studies that kind of show like a breadth and depth of your skills. And once again, I know that's a lot for a junior person. I know that's a lot to even wrap your head around. But if you really want to stand out, and like I said, progress in your career, that you're going to have to do that. So, for example, you need to have one that's technical, right, and straightforward, that shows like the basis of technical stuff, of trade-offs, right, of doing some kind of flow, some kind of exploration. Then you can show one that's a little bit more exploratory and visual heavy. There's also case studies where you can show more of the strategy side as well, in a sense. There might be work where you would want to show more of like the systems thinking, right, side of stuff, because companies ask for that as well. There might be one where you would want to flex a little bit of research, right, and discovery, but you're still having it as a product design case study if a company is looking for that end-to-end process. And I think at the end of the day, when you interview for a company, you are going to have to tailor your case studies for certain roles and highlight certain things that they're saying that they're looking for systems thinking. And I think that you're also going to have to ask the recruiter or even the hiring manager, because a lot of them are not, and I'm letting everyone know this, a lot of them are not going to be fleshed out like Meta's UX interview guide. A lot of them are not going to be fleshed out like well-known companies when they give you what they're looking for, right? In a portfolio review, you're going to literally need to ask this person, even throughout the interview process, hey, what are you looking for? Even if they do give you a call because they just like your output, right? What are you looking for? What do you want out of this role, right? What should I highlight as well when I'm presenting my case study? And if they say just say do whatever you want, then once again, you should have got those key indicators right previously in a portfolio. So if a company is telling you that they're going through a redesign, and especially if they're a startup, they're going to need design systems and maintenance, and they're going to need strong visual designers, right, Stella? If a
Yeah.
company is telling you that, oh, we're looking to get into a new market or a business vertical, then they're probably going to need someone really good at product thinking and strategy, right? When you think about it, if
Hmm.
someone is telling you that, oh, I need to have someone on this role where we're working on growing this company's brand, or we're working on connecting someone to the sales channel, then that's growth, right? So maybe you need to really show that. And like I said, it's a lot of work, But if you are really cognizant of these things and you have different case studies, or some of your case studies have these certain elements, you can use that to highlight it even more. So I know that was kind of a long response, and I know that was a nuanced response, but yeah, it really is
Yes.
that deep. And yes, this is why product designers get paid a lot of money, because these interviews are over the top. And yes, companies are looking for different things, and there are different like areas and skill sets and focuses. So yeah.
Yeah, no, I love that. You were pretty much providing the golden answer that, it isn't kind of like the templated answer that we usually hear about. And you're right. A friend of mine recently went through an interview with a well-known tech company for 7 hours. That that was intense. Exactly. So yeah, I think, in addition to being prepared, I guess, mentally, you have to be prepared physically, I guess, right? To sustain
Hmm.
yourself for 7 hours, and also kind of tailoring your case studies in different nuances like that. That's
Yeah.
something that a lot of us probably haven't thought of, because I think most junior designers, they rest their case studies on the fact that, okay, these are different topics, these are different, companies. That's probably not the point. The point is you want to showcase your skill set in different ways. The topics, nobody cares about the topics, right? So no, I love, love, love your, insights in this episode, and I wish we have more time, but we're running out of time. But we have a lot more episodes planned for everybody. So I hope you will stay with us for the next episode and onward. And thank you so much, Carrie, for your time today. We will see you back again for another episode.